Hello, everybody. My name's James, and welcome to the first Planet FPL Clash of the Correspondents of the 2023-24 season. I'm delighted to say on this podcast, I'm joined by the correspondent from South London's finest club, and we're also joined by a correspondent from Crystal Palace today. Let me introduce you first to our Palace correspondent, Ruaidhri McLaughlin-Dowd. How are you, Rory?
I'm good, James. You all right?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. And of course, South London's finest, of course, is the Arsenal from Woolwich. How are you, Adam Pritchard?
Yes, I'm just glad you called us the finest club. So I'll take that as a compliment in some way. I'm doing all right, thanks, James.
The competition isn't up to much, mate. Let's be honest. Rory, good start for Palace at the weekend, mate. Thoughts on the win at Sheffield United?
Yeah, I was going to say they're only ahead of us on goals scored at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult to tell how good we are really after that game. I think Sheffield United would accept they're not necessarily prepared for the first game of the season at the moment, losing their two best players, but. Even then, if you play a championship team in a cup match, you can always struggle and away from home. Well, you can struggle away from home at Bramall Lane. You have to fight for the right to play there, and I think our team is good for that. I think they will scrap and fight for the right to play. It's more of a question of quality, I think, going forward, whether we're going to have the ability to create chances against more stubborn defences than Sheffield United were at the weekend. Because we also had 2 goals disallowed, didn't we? We had 2 offside goals, which maybe after a couple of games, they wouldn't make that sort of early step to follow in a shot or something.
Is the problem creating or scoring?
It's both. So we haven't... Edouard has not really torn up trees since he's come into the club, and neither has Mateta, although Mateta does have a habit of scoring quite important goals, like the Leicester goal last season, for example. But it is creating with, I think, Schluppanayu, especially in wide positions. And then Doucouré is good for maintaining possession, but he's not necessarily gonna get too many assists in a season. So, and I think Lerma's more solid as well. So there'd be a lot on Eze's shoulders if it is just this team moving into the season. So it's both.
Did it feel like a must win because of Sheffield United's situation? Was that pressure there with knowing Arsenal's coming next?
I think so, yeah. And then obviously it's Brentford and then Wolves, and I think Wolves looked quite good last night despite all the pre-season that they had. So yeah, I think it did feel like a must win, not in the sense of, if you lose this game, you're going down, but it's 3 points. I think most teams that we'll be battling out with will be looking to get. Basically, I think a lot of those teams will get that. So it's more relative to the competition. If we don't get those 3 points, it's probably not ideal. But first game of the season, we're haunted by what happened at Bramall Lane before when Lundstrom scored. They obviously finished 9th that season, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, playing against a newly promoted team away from home, I would probably have been able to sort of justify taking a point after the fact, just coping with that. But I think, yeah, it was pretty much a must win.
As it was, I guess, for you, Adam, it's different kind of pressure now, isn't it? It's like got to be beating teams like Nottingham Forest at home. Happy with the opening day win?
Happy with the result. I think the first half performance, you could say it's the old cliche, it's a game in 2 halves. To be honest, I think the first 55 minutes were excellent. There's probably an element that we were perhaps playing with our food a little bit, not having that or not applying that kind of killer touch that you see Man City doing in those kind of situations. But I thought the opening half was like a complete breeze of a game. Obviously Forest had a couple of breakaway chances, but they were nothing more than like kind of, I don't even want to say momentary lapses in the defense. It was just kind of fortunate circumstances of events that led to them having a couple of efforts on goal. But yeah, no, I think I was intrigued by Arteta's willingness to essentially experiment in a Premier League game. I didn't think he would be that confident in the team's ability to essentially experiment with the side. But obviously, I guess given Forest's away record last season was woeful, I think it was the worst of any of the teams that didn't go down. So I think if you're going to experiment in any game, probably that's the time to do it.
I'm going to guess alludes to a little bit this kind of movement into a 3-1-6 shape within possession. I said on Monday's podcast that it felt a bit slow. and that you had tried it because of the opponent. Was that a fair analysis in your opinion?
I think methodical rather than slow might be the way I would put it, because it wasn't like it was static. It was very fluid. Certainly in like the final third, like there was a lot of really good positional rotation, like Rice pushing up higher, Havertz kind of drifting into wide spaces, Martinelli coming a little bit inside. I think certainly in between those three, I thought the movement was really, really interesting to watch. And yeah, so I guess it was more what you would expect of, like I say, of a Man City, in a way that sometimes they get accused of kind of sterile domination and their games being a bit boring. I think the contrast compared to Arsenal last season, where it was like all guns blazing, everything was being played at a million miles an hour. I think this season, perhaps there are going to be times where we see that kind of more methodical approach to games. And when you've got players like Martinelli and Saka, you can rely on them pulling out those kind of individual explosive moments that kind of ups the tempo for everyone else. So yeah, more methodical than slow, I would say.
Yeah, we did essentially win the game because of those two players and the two individual moments that they provided. Is that a concern? Because quite a bit's been made of the lack of a big chance in the game, quite a low XG, and no one's suggesting you didn't deserve to win. But is that concerning in any way to you?
No, not really, because I still do think there were other decent chances. Like we had a lot of corners, and normally I think our set piece delivery is much better than it was on the day. Declan Rice had a couple of good chances where I think had he got his eye in a little bit more, maybe one of those would have found the back of the net. So it's not like a massive concern. At the end of the day, when you've got players that are capable of like kind of producing those individual moments of brilliance like Saka and Martinelli, it's kind of, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, in a way. Like it's no shame to be relying, or not even relying, it's no shame to use that as a kind of tool in your armory, I would say. And I also think Forest set up with a very clear tactic of like stifling us as much as possible. So I think it would be optimistic to think that we were going to create like loads and loads of big chances when the opponent is setting up that deep anyway.
Okay, fair. Before we talk a bit of FPL, I want to kind of talk transfers a bit, and this comes with a caveat that we are pre-recording this on Tuesday morning. It should be a couple of days before you get to hear or watch this. Rory, anything you're hearing in terms of Palace and transfer window at the moment? Because he does seem a bit quiet on the front, but your ears might be a bit closer to it, because I can't look at transfer news and not see Chelsea's name at the moment. So maybe there is stuff going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's mostly linked with stuff out, which is a bit worrying. The sort of Elise situation with the release clause, and Chelsea potentially being in there, Doucouré potentially as well to Liverpool, Anderson to Newcastle has not gone away, but we're being linked with players primarily to replace them. The worrying thing is we don't seem to be being linked with a left winger to replace Zaha. We are being linked with Che Adams quite a bit as well, but I think if Elise left, they would then put that money towards a striker rather than a right winger, and try and go with either Jurrien Timber or Ebe Eze to replace him. So
what's this Elise contract situation in? Because I've seen very conflicting reports in terms of there is a release clause, there isn't release clause. What do you know?
I've got no idea. There was a suggestion at the start that there was a kind of time limited release clause, so it has to be before a certain date. That's something one of the Palace kind of ITK said at the start of the window. Other than that, there seem to be quite a few weird clauses related to it, and also some people are suggesting he actually it came out the same day as Wilf didn't renew his contract, so there was an offer of 200 grand a week on the table. So
Zaha, to clarify.
Yeah, but that's 200 grand a week, which isn't going somewhere and is potentially budgeted for. So the other players will be looking at that, thinking they could potentially get a slice of that. And Elise, that information came out sort of around that time, but maybe that's being too optimistic from our perspective. Chelsea are buying absolutely everyone. The thing is, when you trigger a release clause, you have to pay it all up front. You can't pay it in installments.
Okay.
So you have to put 35. If it's 35 million, somewhere between.
You've got to pay it in one go rather than spread over 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's separate to amortization, because amortization is how it goes into the books, not the cash exchange. But The question is whether they have that and they're trying to do part exchange with players. And it's possible that it's only a Champions League release clause. And then they're saying you should sell them to us for 40 million because you'll only get 35 million in 12 months. But then from our perspective, then that's another year where Raksaki's in the Championship getting better or Ebe Eze improving. So I'm hoping he doesn't go because, as we just discussed, that team with Schlupp and AU as the wingers seems a bit, it's solid. They're going to do the defensive work, but they're not necessarily the most creative players on earth.
No, and the point is, despite the fact thoroughly dominating on Saturday, you scored once, right?
Yeah. I mean, their goalie had a good game. Wes Fothering, who we brought from Bromley, actually. So
Tomo calls him League One Wes. Is that harsh?
Well, that's what Paolo Di Canio called him, if you remember when he was at Swindon.
Is that right?
And he walked off after about 20 minutes, I think, or he got sent off and then... No, he got substituted and just walked down the tunnel. And then Paolo Di Canio was calling him League One Wes. But we got him from Bromley, and that's why he kind of has a career. He did really well against us in pre-season about 10 years ago, and we bought him. And then Swindon, Rangers, Sheffield United. He is a good goalkeeper. But he put in a very good performance in that day.
Do we know when Elise is likely to be fit? Let's assume he does stay.
He's running now on grass. It was a hamstring tear. So jogging, it doesn't really test it, is it? But as we saw, I think with, was it KDB did his hamstring and then came back. And it's sprinting really when you'll see that. He's not ready to sprint yet. So probably, I think, definitely after the first international break. So hopefully that's after the transfer window closes and he can't pass a medical. That would be ideal.
Gosh, you might just be prolonging the agony there, Rory. What do we know about Matheus França now that's gone through? He was a player we spoke about a couple of weeks ago on Correspondent Week. We've heard multitude of he's left winger, he's 10, he's 9, multiple different. He's also injured. When's he likely to be available that we know? And do we know yet where Palace and Roy Hodgson intend to use him?
I'm not sure Roy doesn't intend to use him immediately. I think he'll replace Eze next season, and I think he'll probably get minutes this season, possibly off the left. Maybe that is where they're looking at playing him. I don't think we'll see him starting ahead of AU or Schlupp or Eze. So probably this side.
Ballon d'Or clause, mate. Surely he's going to play.
Yeah, well, ideally. I mean, I think he'll be in the team by the end of the season, but I think Roy tends to be a little bit... Cautious, yeah.
No, that's fair. You mentioned players being linked with outs, so we're saying Anderson, Elise. Are you concerned about Eze?
Well, you mentioned him, I think, the other day on one of your pods that you guys might be.
I've been hearing his name in circles the last 72 hours or so.
I think, given Wilf going and potentially Elise going, that would be very expensive. I think I can't see us selling him or accepting to sell him, but he has only got 2 years left. So 2 years is when the selling club usually looks to sell, because when they've got 1 year left, it's really in the buying club's hands.
Yeah, I know, mate. Thanks. The buying club or the buying club. What did you say there, mate?
I think that wasn't a Freudian slip. I think your ears had a sort of Freudian slip. I said buying.
No, fair play. So are we just not really expecting outgoings? Could we be looking at a situation here where this Schlupp, Edouard, Ayew is the team going forward? It does feel bland. There's nothing against any of them individually, but as a collective, it feels quite bland.
Yeah, I mean, we've been linked with quite a few players. We're linked with Demarai Gray, but he's been linked with quite a few. I think Hudson-Odoi, but he seems to be going to Fulham now. Che Adams is another name as a sort of centre forward. But I think if there are outgoings, there will be someone to replace them, but probably someone to replace them for cheaper, and then money will be put elsewhere. We were linked with Nketiah as well, by the way, but that seems to be they've decided to go with Nketiah over Balogun, and Balogun looks to be going abroad somewhere. So, I mean, we will bring in players. I think we'll bring in 2 or 3. The Lewis Hall situation is a bit odd as well with Chelsea, where they seem to be using him as more leverage to try and get Elise, which is disappointing because it's obviously not good for the player that he could potentially be starting for a Premier League club, and then Chelsea would rather have him be a squad player or try and get Elise. It's a bit...
Well, surely if Chelsea have loaned him to you, their expectation is going to play, surely. Otherwise, why bother?
It hasn't gone through.
Has it not confirmed yet? I'm sure I've seen photos of him in a Palace shirt, or I imagine.
Yeah, everything's done and all the contracts have been exchanged and everything, but for some reason it hasn't gone through. So they seem to be sort of putting the brake on it to use him as leverage for Elise.
I'm just not sure where he'd play. People said, he'll cover at left back. And I know Mitchell had a more difficult season last year, but I don't really see that. They come in the team on a left wing. I don't see him being part of that midfield three in terms of first choice as it stands. So I don't see why it would interest Chelsea to do that.
Well, possibly you could see a situation where maybe Ebe Eze moves out to the left and he plays centrally then. Or he could play on the left and sorry.
You mean Eze moved to the left, yeah?
Eze moves to the left and then he plays centrally, or he could play left back. I think he'd be a utility player and would allow us to play a few different formations where we could play a 4-3-3 and he could be one of the three in the middle, or in the 4-2-3-1 he could play left wing, or Mitchell needs a rest every so often. I mean, he's played basically every game for the last 3 seasons, Mitchell. So,
Adam, Rory mentioned Nketiah and staying. Is that how you see that at the moment?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he'll stay. I think it's a combination of the fact that obviously Arteta's just seen more of him playing. He's had more time with him in training, even if Balogun is probably, I don't know if he's the better player at the moment, but he's probably the more potent goal threat at the moment and probably has a higher ceiling. It's just a case of striking while the iron's hot. His value is likely, I think we're asking for around £50 million. So I don't think you're going to be able to get that for Nketiah. So yeah, I think the expectation now is for Nketiah to stay, even though, like Rory was saying, there was talk of, I think it was West Ham and Palace and maybe Brighton as well, were both interested in him at one point. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he'll stay now.
And I take it you think Nketiah would start at the weekend as it stands?
Or
Monday night even.
Yeah, well, no, he definitely won't be starting at the weekend. I can say that for sure. Yeah, I would assume so. I think the goal gives him enough kind of credit in the bank, even if his performance was a little bit dodgy. It's like when you look at, I was looking at some of his stats after the game because I thought he was quite quiet. He only had 28 touches, which was very, very low. It's okay when essentially the formation we were playing, we had so many midfielders. Basically, he
doesn't need to drop short like Jesus.
No, exactly. So that's okay when your team is like dominating the game state, which we were for so much of the first half. And like I was saying, when we're playing with so many midfielders, but that does put so much pressure on your ability to get shots off and like convert chances, which he did. He scored a goal, slightly fortunately with the deflection. But he only had 3 shots, and he didn't have any shots after the 40th minute. So I think that is a little bit worrying, but you can kind of link that into Arsenal in general, kind of taking their foot off the gas a little bit at that time. But yeah, no, I think he'll be given the benefit of the doubt to start.
Are there players? So we think if a big enough offer comes in for Balogun, he'll probably go. Are there others that the club are actively looking to sell at the moment? Like I take it Nicolas Pepe, for example, is still your player.
Yes, although he has, I think him and his agent have verbally agreed a contract with Besiktas. So it's now just kind of up to Arsenal and Besiktas to see if they can agree a fee. I think what's more likely, to be honest, is that we just do another one of these contract termination things and he goes there for free, which is irritating. And it's really a terrible precedent that we've set for ourselves. Hopefully this is the last one of those that we have to do.
Does that make it one of the worst transfers of all time?
It's difficult because I know a lot of people won't believe me when I say this, but I don't actually think he was awful when he played for us. Like when Arteta won the FA Cup it was his first season in charge. Pepe was really good. He started the final and he played really well. So he did show in moments what he could do. I just don't think it's a kind of lazy stereotype of players from Ligue 1, but the physicality of them of coming to the Premier League is sometimes a bit of an issue. But I just think for him in particular, it's a combination of that and his attitude I don't think was quite there. And I don't really know if he ever truly settled into kind of the club. So yeah, I mean, obviously the outlay, it's a terrible deal, no doubt. I just think that the player isn't as kind of awful as the kind of the wider.
No, he's definitely got technical ability. I mean, I've seen that with Tanguy and Ndombele at Tottenham, who's now 5 different managers. None of them want him, and that doesn't even include caretaker ones, I don't think. So, I mean, Pepe has had opportunities, I think. to kind of rebuild during pre-seasons and stuff, and it's not kicked on.
Yeah, no. But when I saw the links to Besiktas, I was a bit like, not disappointed, because to be honest, as long as he leaves the club and we get his wages off the books, I'm not really too concerned where he goes.
Oh, shut him.
But
the player's mental welfare. Come on, mate.
Oh well, no, yeah, obviously all of that kind of is in consideration. But I think he is better than that kind of move at this stage of his career.
Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's just gone there, one of your former boys, mate.
Oh, we managed to get 40 million from Liverpool for him. I have no idea how that happened. That was
there you go. That was a better bit of business. What about people on the fringes like, say, Kieran Tierney? Do you expect players like that to stay with the club at the moment? And I guess, is that also influenced by, obviously, the poor injury that Jurrien Timber's already suffered? We don't know the exact prognosis, but there's certainly ACL damage, I think it's fair to say. And it's going to be months at the minimum.
Yeah, reports are several months for Timber. It does look like it's an ACL, which is devastating, because he's looked so impressive, not just in the kind of Community Shield, but in pre-season as well. I've been really, really impressed, especially considering he's playing left back, which is a position he wasn't really known for playing a whole lot of before. So yeah, that's really, really disappointing. But I don't think that affects Tierney's position in the squad. I think he will still. I certainly think the club are going to look to offload him and are actively looking to offload him, because I would say he's still probably fourth choice left back at the moment, behind, obviously, you got Zinchenko, who's now back fit. You got Tomiyasu and Kivior as well, I think, would play there over him. So yeah, the talks of Tierney at the moment are still Newcastle are the strongly interested Premier League club. I did see a little bit of talk of Real Sociedad as well.
Yeah, I'd seen that.
Which was confusing, considering like a lot of the reason why I think he wants to move, obviously, is game time, but I think he wants to be closer to Scotland, which my geography isn't great, but Spain is not closer to Scotland than London. So yeah, I think Newcastle, I would lean on the side of that deal happening. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a loan with obligation to buy next summer, just to help them out with a bit of the FFP related stuff. But yeah,
you're okay with helping Newcastle out, are you? I know you
no,
think a lot
not
of
at all. Not at all. As long as we whack on a 70 million obligation at the end of the season, if he steps foot in St James's Park, then I'll be fine. But yeah, no, I think he will go. I think there are still some fringe players, like I think Nuno Tavares. I don't think he's left yet. I'm pretty sure he will go. Rob Holding, I wouldn't be surprised if
he's got to be surplus now, hasn't he? Even with the Timber injury.
Yeah, and to be honest, I would think we would be more likely to go out back into the market than rely on Rob Holding, which seems a bit harsh, but yeah, no, I think if we get an offer of like 5 million for Rob Holding, we'd probably take it. And I think that would be good business for whoever is buying him, because I think he's a mid to lower mid-table Premier League standard player for sure.
Are you incomings done then, or is this Timber injury potentially going to change that again?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit difficult to say. I wouldn't be surprised if we were in the market for a centre back still. The links to Laporte never really have gone away, but they've kind of been bubbling under the surface a little bit throughout the summer. So I wouldn't be surprised if that got revived. The João Cancelo talk has been there all summer, and I've never really seen it happening personally, just because of the wages.
Does City want to give you any more players after last season
exactly,
as well?
And that's the big. I think that's been and will be the big barrier to any kind of Laporte potential deal. Like, you'd have to think they'd be wary of doing that after what happened last season. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we went in for a centre back, or maybe like a right back who can cover centre back. I know in January we were linked quite strongly with Ivan Fresneda. Is a young Spanish international, so I wouldn't be surprised if talks of him moving kind of picked up again. But I mean, other than that, I guess maybe we might still be in the market for cover for Saka on the right wing. Palace might have a player there that I'm interested in, but
hello.
For the harmony of this conversation, I'll leave
Michael
that.
Elise is not going anywhere to sit on the bench, surely.
Yeah, that's the problem with buyout clauses, is there's no bidding war, so can't even bid up his price with all the interest.
And that's the thing, it's not even like to be honest, if we were going to pay for, and I'm not saying that deal will happen, but hypothetically, if we were to buy a player who could push Saka, cover for him in Europe a little bit, and be an option if he's injured, like 35 million is probably what you're looking at paying anyway. So it's not even like it's an exorbitant fee. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if talk of that kind of picked up a little bit towards the end of the window.
Well, that's why I'm skeptical whether it exists, because for a club your size or City, you know, Mahrez is obviously gone, and Elise looks like a kind of Mahrez regen, basically. That's why I'm skeptical that it exists, because you'd pay that for a squad player anyway, even if you didn't think you'd start him.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Like, and the other players that we've been linked with, kind of in that attacking wing position, we were vaguely linked with Kudus before. I think even before Brighton like agreed a deal with him, but now it seems like he might be going to West Ham. That one's a bit hard to track. And then I saw talk out of Spain that Ansu Fati might be a player that's on Arsenal's radar, which would be interesting, because he's certainly got a lot of potential, and he's a very kind of pacey, explosive winger. So like would be a great kind of option to have in the squad and off the bench. But obviously I know he's, with his injury history, it kind of like stunted his growth a little bit. So maybe we can get him on a knockdown fee. But yeah, I think that those are kind of the players that I've heard talk of.
I suppose the concern for you, Rory, must be if that release clause does exist, someone obviously can just come and pay out on August 31st, and you've got no time to do anything.
Yeah, we'd be stuffed. Hope they just turn the phones off. Then, you know, you can't.
It doesn't work like when you bought Mr. You Know Who from Atletico Madrid, Adam. That was quite near the end of the window, but that money went straight to La Liga, didn't it? Rather than Atletico. It doesn't work like that, obviously, here in our system.
Well, and also so I was going to say, and also in Spain, it's mandatory to have a buyout clause in players' contracts. So I think that kind of system over there is much more, it's much more well established with like clubs in the league as well. But I mean, we've got a couple of players that you could probably have on loan. Like obviously Arsenal have a few kind of South London kids that came up through the academy. It's like before like pre-season, at the end of last season, I was pretty convinced. Oh, I wasn't convinced. I was a little bit worried Smith Rowe might be out kind of in the cold a little bit. Now it seems like that's not the case. He's been reintegrated after the under-21s tournament in the summer, which is great from my perspective. But I have been surprised, considering where he's from, that Palace haven't been linked, even with a loan.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know what kind of wages he's on, but yeah, I'm surprised as well. Something our fans always bring up. He's born in Thornton Heath, I think. So that's like basically where the ground is. So yeah, our fans do often bring him up as someone we could get. But I think he was linked with Villa a few years back, wasn't he, when they lost Grealish? Yeah, it is a worry that someone could just come along and pay the money on the last day, and we wouldn't have the time then to replace him. And I think that's Chelsea's kind of bargaining chip, is even if they can't trigger it, say it's a Champions League release clause, that he could go anyway, just from someone else triggering it. So
well, and that's the thing. It's like, although it would be weird for a club not to have bought him already if that clause is active, at the same time, if it is real, there's no need for negotiations. You can leave it as late as you want, really.
Yeah, so, you just put the cash on the table, and then you don't even have to talk to us, right?
Yeah,
I think there are strange clauses in there. I think there are some strange clauses that people have to meet. I don't know why, but that's what Ed Aarons, who's usually quite well connected at Crystal Palace, said in the Guardian. He was saying that there are some interesting clauses in there.
Again, must reiterate, we're pre-recording this on Tuesday morning. As you mentioned about incomings, Adam, you never said nothing about David Raya. Is this still going on, or it seems to have gone quiet?
To be honest, I've kind of assumed that it's already done. Like, I think it is done. I think it's just a case of like, I think it was David Ornstein reported that he'd already had his medical over the weekend. So I think it's just a case of
crossing the T's.
Yeah, because obviously with like, I would assume it's a little bit more complicated with a loan with an option to buy kind of transfer deal. So yeah, no, I think that one will still happen. Yeah.
What's the benefit in that? Getting to have a look at him for a year? I mean, you're saying, would it be obligation as well?
No, I think it would only be option. So I think it's 3 million loan fee with option to buy for 27 million. Yeah, it's like we were talking in the correspondent week, which was before the loan version of this transfer kind of manifested. and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I think the loan aspect, it changes the complexion completely, because you've got no obligation to play him. Like if Ramsdale, obviously he will start number one, Raya signs, he's still going to be the number one goalkeeper. If he continues to perform very well throughout the season, then you've got no obligation to play him at all, really. I would assume he will get the cup games regardless of how Ramsdale plays. But
would that include Champions League, in your opinion?
Yes, yeah, I think it would. Certainly for the group stages, I think it would. So yeah, and I think it kind of, whilst it still applies a bit of pressure to Ramsdale, I think it takes that kind of that longer term looming threat off of his shoulders a little bit, and kind of gives him the personal confidence that, look, Arteta and the club still believe that you're the guy to be the number one goalkeeper, but obviously we've just sold our number two goalkeeper. This option presented itself, so we've got him here as backup to to push you on a little bit. So yeah, no, I actually also think it's a very, very good deal, given that Tottenham and Chelsea were quoted 40 million, I think, earlier in the window, and we've managed to negotiate it to 3 million with an option for 27. I think it's very good business.
And Tottenham and Chelsea look like mine, but both still have issues in that position, which I won't talk about right now. Talking of goalkeepers, though, Adam, I'm very much considering buying Matt Turner this week in FPL. Is he any good?
I think he's fine. Yeah, I have him as well, and in my kind of bus team for game week 2, I'm starting him. My other keeper is Pickford, so I don't know if I'm just kind of scarred about that clean sheet wipeout over the weekend. But yeah, no, I think he's a very solid shot stopper. And what was always interesting about when he was bought for Arsenal was that playing out from the back with his feet was never like his strong point. It was always his kind of shot stopping ability, which always seemed a little bit weird given the kind of issues that Arteta had with Leno, who is as we saw at the weekend, is an excellent shot stopper and a very, very good goalkeeper, but playing out from the back is probably his main weakness. So that fit was always a little bit odd. He certainly improved in that regard, despite a couple of hairy moments at the weekend. But yeah, no, I think he's a perfectly solid Premier League keeper, and certainly good enough to be Forest's number one. I know the talk of them getting Henderson has kind of quietened down a little bit after some of Ten Hag's comments.
Surely Turner's not going there to be number 2, is it? He might as well just stayed with you.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that would have been a weird career move from him. Yeah, so I think he's a pretty solid, serviceable Premier League goalkeeper.
Yeah, look, I've only seen him for USA. It looks absolutely fine. Looked like a good goalkeeper, particularly in the game against England, for example. So yeah, don't have concerns from that point of view. Rory, you can probably answer the next question. I was kind of set in my mind that Sam Johnston was going to be the keeper that I moved on, and that's partly because I also got Jordan Pickford. And the Pickford-Turner rotation for a number of weeks is pretty good, up to around about game week 9-10. But looking longer term, he's very good with Johnston, right up to Christmas, bar 1 or 2 games. Sort of Brentford away, Tottenham at home, looks like as bad as it would be if I kept with Johnston. So I'm wavering on selling Johnston a bit now, because I trust you more than I trust Everton, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think definitely with Doucouré and Lerma there sitting in front of the defence, we won't concede too many chances. So I think we will be fairly solid. And if we're going to do well this season, it will be built on having a solid defence and probably boring a lot of teams to death and then nicking it 1-0. So I think he will. He has been very good for us since he came in. He's our first sort of modern goalkeeper in a sense. He is good with his feet as well. So yeah, I would back Johnston. I would bring him in myself, I think, on a wild card, but I think the Areola situation where you can go Areola Turner seems like, but their fixtures are quite bad, so I think that would probably wait until 9.
Exactly. If you look at, say, game week 6, if Areola stays in goal, he goes to Liverpool and Turner goes to City.
Yeah,
I mean, flip a coin on what you want to do with that. You presumably play Areola, but you're not going to like looking at it.
No, so I think that would be from game week 9 or something, or 10.
Similarly, game week 3, West Ham go to Brighton, Forest go to Man United. It's some ugly ones in there.
Yeah, so that's maybe not for the immediate. But I think Johnston will keep quite a few clean sheets this season for Palace, because anything we do will be built off defence.
Yeah, I was set kind of pre my mind before I started game week 1 with the strategy I took that it was every chance I'd end up downgrading to Turner, and was sure at that stage it was Johnston I'd move on. But yeah, looking at it longer term, I don't really want to piss about too much with goalkeeper transfers. And if I don't think I'm going to wild card in sort of October-ish, and it might be later, then I'm more maybe leaning towards keeping Johnston now. And I do agree exactly what you said about with Lerma coming in. That feels much stronger now. But have we still got concerns about Decore? You did mention it near the start.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think we would sell him unless, if we did lose Elise, then selling the two of them, potentially they might think that they can do something where they spread that money around a few positions, because they need to replace Wolf, obviously, and potentially a striker. But to be honest, I don't think they will sell Decore, primarily because then you are really opening yourself up to a possibility of struggling this season.
What would be the solution in there? Say I was unavailable anyway through injury or suspension. What do Palace do in that position at the moment now? It does look way more like it's going to be two in there, with Lerma given a little bit more license to push on as he did at the weekend.
Yeah, so if Decore is injured, then it's probably Hughes, but Hughes is injured. So there's a chance there would be Lerma and Schlupp there, and then I don't know who plays left wing. It is
Lewis Hall if you do the business, mate.
Yeah, if we do the business, well, then Lewis Hall might play central midfield and we might be a 4-3-3. But yeah, it is quite bare bones at the moment, to be honest. And we need to bring in players for depth as much as anything else.
What's the situation with Gator? Because he's
someone should take control of his Twitter account, that's for sure.
I think his agent has his Twitter account.
Is that right?
Yeah,
that's what I'd mentioned that I'd heard as well.
Yeah, so I don't think he controls that, but yeah, he's lost the plot because he's not in the team. Like, from his perspective, if you're not starting, why would you not go and live in the south of Spain? Because that's where he's from, and obviously he's got connections to a few clubs there. I think Valencia are the one that are being linked. We need to get a replacement before he can move on, and there's a chance that maybe a sort of awkward reintegration with the squad. I don't think it'd be difficult to reintegrate him with the squad, maybe more the manager, given the context, because obviously, he's quite a character and everyone likes him, I think. So I don't think it'd be difficult to reintegrate him in the squad. But he signed a contract in January to add an extra year. So it's quite strange. But obviously he lost the shirt to Johnston for the last 10 games because he got injured, and Johnston was so good that he's not going to get it back.
But for those who haven't seen the tweet, that is one of the most bizarre tweets I think you'd imagine. Palace dropped their team sheet, and Gator, or at least Gator's account, has responded with a "How can I play when I'm not in the team sheet?" Well, presumably you're not in the travelling squad that's gone to Bramall Lane.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
Roy gave a typically sort of I don't know, politically phrased message to I think Norwegian television, where he was talking about Guaita and saying, we've got a situation where Johnston's number one and the number two is a 19-year-old goalkeeper because the other one's refusing to play, or something like that. So it was kind of, Roy called him out, and then this is probably more of a response to what Roy said to him anyway. But...
Okay, well, that's that set in goal then. Adam, Gabriel. Now we should caveat that again, we're pre-recording this on Tuesday, so he might be 4.9 by the time that people hear this. What's your take, Adam? What should people do? Do you think he'll come back in the team at Palace? I guess it's the first place to start.
I think if I had was in the situation where I hadn't seen obviously the news pre-deadline, wasn't able to move him out, I would still keep a hold of him if I had him, which I don't. So it's kind of easier for me to say. I think, I would think he would come back in for Palace. I think we're more likely to see the traditional, in air quotes, Arsenal back four with White at right back, Saliba right centre back, Gabriel left centre back, and then Zinchenko, who is back fit now.
Yep.
I think will probably come in at left back.
He's had no pre-season at all, though, has he? Is there a risk in that?
Yeah, there probably is a risk. So I guess it could be either him or Tomiyasu. I just think, I would think Zinchenko. My mindset is if the player's on the bench, they're kind of, or if the player's like back in full training, they're probably fit enough to play. So I think with another week of training under his belt, obviously this is before Arteta's press conference ahead of the match, I think he's got a decent chance of playing. On Gabriel, I think obviously it's disappointing. You kind of got the double blow of finding out he's not starting, him coming off the bench for a 1-pointer, and then Saliba gets a jammy assist that kind of takes him above him quite a lot. But I think you've almost got to take yourself out of that mindset, because that Saliba assist is basically nonsense pretty much. So even if Gabriel plays the full 90, you've probably only missed out on 1 point, essentially.
I take it you own Saliba.
No, I don't own any.
Oh, is that why you're calling the assist nonsense then? Yeah.
I mean, it is nonsense.
It did sound a bit bitter.
No, not bitter at all. I got no dog in this fight. So yeah, I think it's very much like a kind of fantasy assist, really. So I think Gabriel owners kind of just have to look at it as losing out on 1 point rather than the kind of gap to the Saliba assist.
So did you take Gabriel out for? Did you go Timber?
No, I didn't own any Arsenal defenders at all pre-season.
Oh, okay. That's strange. Everybody else did, mate.
Well, no, this is what I was talking to you about in Correspondent Week. Obviously, it had such an impact, so I'm glad you remember, where it was...
Your fixtures had an impact on my decision-making, mate, because they look brilliant.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It was the kind of worries I had about us getting caught in transition, which happened a lot in pre-season. It happened in the City game in the Community Shield, and I guess you could argue it happened against Forest as well, because it was, albeit it was a bit of a strange kind of counter-attack to...
It was from a corner of yours, though,
it was from our corner, and I don't think we left one player back, or we certainly didn't leave enough. And obviously Elanga kind of absolutely rapid pace and amazing to burst beyond Saka, who isn't exactly slow. So yeah, it was kind of those the positional transitions. I was a little bit worried we didn't have exactly nailed down yet, which was why I decided to go against the Arsenal defence. But yeah, I think if I owned Gabriel, I would still hold him.
Did you go 3 forwards then?
No, just the two. I think even though I was confident Nketiah would start against Forest, I think Jesus won't be out long term, so I didn't really want to book in a transfer. And obviously, João Pedro emerged as an option sort of later on in pre-season, so it felt like that was the better place to kind of put my money in the budget forward slot. So no, it's just Saka and Martinelli for me. I think they were the two I was on when the game opened, and I think they're like by far and away the best options in that price bracket.
Any concerns from that perspective? I'm going to say almost certainly none with Saka, but with Martinelli, different opponent this week. Is he liable to rotation at all, do you think, in not just this fixture but upcoming games?
To be honest, he's the kind of player where if he's fit, I always want to see him starting. Just because, I mean, you saw what he did at the weekend. That assist was like completely outrageous. Even the kind of work in the build up to it, where he kind of does I don't want to say it's Messi-esque, but it's the first player that springs to mind where he kind of does the slow jog, like kind of leans back a little bit and then just goes forward with a rapid burst of pace to kind of catch the defenders off guard. So yeah, I think he certainly on the left side, he brings that kind of explosive pace that I don't think Trossard does, even though Trossard is a very, very good player who I would like to see more of. I just think I think if Martinelli's fit, you kind of have to start him.
What would you say to those who started with Odegaard or Havertz in FPL? Is that a concern?
Havertz, I'd ask why. But Odegaard, I think you'd probably hold him for now. Like, I would assume anyone who has Odegaard also has Saka. And I think I wouldn't say moving down to Martinelli is a sideways move, but I think you've got to ride out the kind of first, certainly whilst our fixtures are this good. I would think, I realised that was a bit of an insult there, sorry. Whilst our fixtures are still like decent, I think you kind of have to hold strong with him and maybe look to add Martinelli in another spot rather than swapping out Odegaard.
I think the Odegaard concern comes to something that we discussed in pre-season was my think that he could end up a bit deeper this year. And it's also what put me off with Fernandes a little bit, Bruno Fernandes, obviously. And certainly in the way you moved within system at the weekend, with Rice then going into the 8 and then Havertz going into 10, was then Odegaard dropping out deeper as well, right? And that's what will concern people a bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid because obviously Ben White, even though he was positionally essentially like a traditional right back in air quotes, where he wasn't bombing on as much, but he was certainly on the right-hand side of the pitch beyond the halfway line for most of the time. because he's not going as advanced, bringing out the ball with his feet, you do need Odegaard to drop a little bit deeper to kind of fill that void. So yeah, I think I wouldn't be too concerned because, I mean, we saw from last season he's capable of hitting a very good shot from outside of the area. So you can always have one of those. And I think he's still on free kicks. And given the quality of some of our corners at the weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if he took a couple of those as well. So yeah, it was a little bit concerning, I guess, as a fantasy owner this weekend, but I don't think we'll play this system all the time. So I think you'll want to have that kind of game data of us playing these different formations and these different tactical systems to really make a more informed decision, I would say.
And Havertz, was that a genuine comment, or were we just taking the piss in terms of why have you got him?
Bit of both. Obviously, I think he's a good player. I think he's a good player in this system. Like, obviously, I can't really comment too much on how he did at Chelsea. Certainly not without getting abused too much. But I thought he played pretty well.
You brought this on yourself, mate.
Yeah, I did. I thought he played pretty well in a kind of very Xhaka-like role. Like, I think he won 5 out of 9 ground duels, which is obviously him kind of competing in the challenges much more than I think he would have done at Chelsea, and much more than I think a lot of people would have expected for him. And yeah, the positional rotation he had with Martinelli and Rice, like I mentioned earlier, was really nice to see. So I think he's a very good tactical addition to the Arsenal side. I just don't know, especially with like the emergence of Maddison. Well, not the emergence, with Maddison's performance at the weekend. I think certainly in that price bracket, he is a much more attractive option than Havertz, I would say.
Okay. Eze, Rory. I think the concern for owners was always going to be, what if he blanks at Sheffield United? And then you knew it was a certainty that at least something else in that 6.5 bracket would return. Mitoma, Diaby, Mbeumo, Harvey Barnes all did. What would you say to Eze owners at this stage?
Well, he's on all set pieces, so he can pretty much return in any game. But I think Eze is not necessarily as explosive as some of those names you mentioned, certainly like Barnes and Mbeumo and stuff. They can go off in a game, whereas Eze, I think, probably won't do that. I think he would be someone you'd hold throughout the season because he'll get consistent returns. He will be the focal point based on the run-in. I can't remember how many goals he scored after Roy took over. I think it was 6 in 10 or something like that. So he will get returns over the course of the season, but if there's someone else in that price bracket, you should probably move on to them, because we know fantasy football, as much as anything else, is about kind of following short-term trends and getting on players while they're going off. Whereas Eze, I think, is someone who you'd have over 38 games. That's
going to be the temptation. Arsenal at home, Brentford away, just looking at that immediately in the next two, is tough and challenging. And you've got Diaby, who looked very lively in the first half at St James's Park, now walks into Everton at home and Burnley away. And the trend of buyers for Diaby is going to happen versus sales of Eze. You are potentially flipping 0.2, and maybe if it keeps going in that direction, maybe in 0.3, 0.4. And people we know will get concerned about value quite quickly.
Yeah, value only matters if you sell the player, though, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you hold him, then it doesn't really matter too much. And he will, as I said, he can return in any game. I mean, Arsenal's a difficult game, but we scored a goal from a corner. I think in the game at the Emirates, Schlupp scored from a corner, and that would probably be Eze putting the ball in the box this time. So yeah, set pieces and free kicks he could return in any game. And also, Adam's already mentioned they potentially have a bit of a weakness on transition, and that would be us defending probably in a low block with a back six mostly, and then Eze, Edouard, Schlupp and AU trying to counter. So Eze will probably be central to anything we do produce in the game on a transition as well. So
quick one, Adam, actually, just I think it's a fair point Rory raised there about defensively. And obviously this really strange quirk that you keep conceding at home. I think it's 2 clean sheets since the start of last season. You've had a lot more away from home. I'm sure there'll be someone listening to this who's got a debate this week or something like Chilwell at West Ham, Stones, subject to what he might have done in the Super Cup versus Newcastle, and then say a Saliba away to Palace. What do you leave out from that? I think some people being in that circumstance will have Trent and then obviously definitely play him. Who would you leave out from those 3?
I mean, the City one is a little bit difficult to say. I think Saliba can always act as an aerial threat from set pieces. Obviously, I know that we discussed this in pre-season, James, that Gabriel has the kind of higher XG, but I mean, when it's a defender, it's relatively minimal. Yeah, it's interesting because the way that we're conceding goals now, I think, is a little bit different to how we were doing it in certainly last season. Like, I've noticed much more, like we were saying, it definitely feels like more of a tactical adjustment this season that needs to be made, which was why I was a little bit kind of hesitant to go with the Arsenal defence from the off, just because I feel like it will take us a bit of time to get used to the new players and the new system and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think if you've got Chilwell, you have to start him. I think that's kind of that's a no-brainer, and I think probably a few people might have Colwill as well, and I would even be tempted to start him as well. Like, I know there's talk that Bowen might be moving into a more central position, and maybe that offers a bit of a different threat there. But I think I would definitely play him. And then the Saliba one is difficult. I feel like if you've got a 5 million defender, you're probably going to want to play him more often than not. I think the games where you would look at thinking, yeah, I probably should bench Saliba are against Liverpool, against City, probably now, I guess, against Newcastle as well, and maybe away at Old Trafford, and maybe away at Spurs now, kind of the way that you guys are playing.
Thanks.
I got there eventually.
I'm here.
So yeah, no, I think if you're buying a 5 million defender, I think you kind of have to play him in games like this.
All right, duly noted. Thank you very much, gents. Let's do predictions then before we finish up. Go on, Rory, give us a correct score prediction for Monday night.
1-1.
Good lad. Adam, your face, you're so rude. You lot have had one good season, got way above your station. Go on, mate.
6-0 now. 3-1 I'll go for.
So no clean sheet.
No clean sheet, yeah. I'd almost be more confident that we would concede than we will win, if that makes sense.
Okay. It feels like low scoring one to me. I 1-0 to you, I think, Adam. I can see it. I don't see it being a 3-2 or anything like that at all. Is that a fair comment, Rory? Does it feel that way to you, like a low scoring game?
Yeah, I mean, last season they beat us 2-0, and I think they were like all over us for the first 20 minutes, and they scored a goal from a set piece, and the other one was an own goal. But I think we had chances in that game as well. I think Ramsdale made a good save from Eze and also Edouard. I think, yeah, we will. Roy tends to show too much respect to the big teams. I mean, he always calls them the Arsenal. So that would be that would be infuriating in the post-match interview when we lose 2-0, and then he calls them the Arsenal.
You obviously 1-0 on the opening Friday night game last year, Adam, and it was a lot of talk about some of the previous bad nights you'd had at Selhurst, the 3-0 the year before, and the 3-0 in the 16-17 season as well. But they were both Monday nights, not Friday nights, Adam. It's different in South London on a Monday to a Friday.
It's a different day of the week. Kind of everyone's got the Monday blues.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think it will more likely be 1-1 than it will 1-0 to Arsenal. Something about the way we're set up at the moment, I'm not too confident we'll keep a clean sheet.
That's concerning because on paper, the Palace look one of the weakest at the moment in terms of teams that could hurt you, I think. And that's not meant disrespectfully, but it's almost like if you keep Eze quiet, are the others going to finish the chances? I'm a bit surprised when you say that, mate.
But I mean, like we were saying about Forest's away record is woeful. But
yeah, true.
They managed to score, and especially in a game state where, like, maybe you guys will disagree. It wouldn't surprise me anyway if the first half was a little bit similar to how we played against Forest, where we have so much of the ball and it looks like we go, like I say, kind of 1-2 goals up, and it looks like it's going to be a walk in the park. And then the second half, when it gets to 60 minutes, something changes.
That wouldn't be like you to look like you're going to completely dominate someone and throw away a couple of goal lead, mate.
Never happened before. Definitely not any embarrassing examples of that. So,
Rory, you were nodding in agreement with that. Is that fair then?
Yeah, until he said they'd go 2 goals up. I think it's possible that we keep them out, to be honest, for a while and sort of try and nick it at the end. I think that, they could always score. I mean, Martinelli up against Joe Ward is quite worrying. But then I think we will be very solid, and those two in front of the defence will probably break up play fairly effectively. The only issue, I think, is actually keeping hold of the ball in their half of the pitch. I don't think AU, Schlupp, Edouard, Eze is necessarily going to keep the ball too well. So it might just be waves of pressure. But then we will have a period in the game. As I said, I mean, the game last season was sort of written up as Arsenal battering us. But if you go back and look at it, it really wasn't the case. It was they sort of won the game on an own goal because we were sort of pushing them at the start of the second half.
I think, to be fair, they could have been out of sight in the first 20 minutes, couldn't they? It's probably where that narrative comes from.
Yeah, but then we Ramsdale made 2 good saves there from Eze and Edouard. So I don't know.
It
I
always
don't
feels
think
like, Rory, going to your place, like in terms of, I know my team went there and won very handsomely in January, very unusually, but always go there and I think if I can get out of here for 1-0, I'm like delighted with that, get the points and leave. So I always feel going to Selhurst Park.
Yeah, the first half of that game was pretty much 50-50, and then just Harry Kane decided he was going to be world class. So,
and I think we're now in a situation where we have to start. Obviously, I've been, and Arsenal fans have kind of been saying this for a while, but I think this will be the season where everyone in like kind of the wider footballing space will look at Saka and Martinelli in that way as well. Because I think that's the reason why I think we will score 3 goals, because I think they are. I like Saka on his day, I think is truly unstoppable. His 7 out of 10 is still excellent. Like at the weekend, I thought he was very, very good, and he can still be better. So yeah, I think that's why I would back us to score goals.
All right, fair choose. Thank you both very much, gents. Anything you want to promote before you go, Rory?
No, not.
Adam?
You can follow me on Twitter, but I don't know why you do that.
Okay, don't do that then. I won't bag it, but the links to the guys' Twitters are in the bio. Next week's Clash to Correspondents will be Chelsea versus Luton Town with Gary Mantle and Dan Ashby. Just leaves me to say thanks again so much to Rory and to Adam. Good luck this weekend, gents. Cue music, please, man child.